I don't know if you know this, but when you get invited to do a talk, usually the conversation goes like this. Could you come to our association and speak on September 15th? And you say, yes, I can. And then a month later, someone phones you and says, would you mind talking about, or just putting your talk in the theme of our conference? I say, well, I can do that. And then the next thing, about a month later, someone says, could you talk about pregnancy and chiropractic? I don't know what to do about that. That's not my topic. So these TED Talks are just so valuable for us because it's casual, you get to speak what you want to speak about, and it's like karaoke for researchers. We get to come up here and do this. So I'm going to give you my karaoke version of something I'd just like to tell you about. It's nothing fancy. It's something that hopefully we can discuss. But let's start with this. Who's in favor of democracy? Yeah. I see the ones who aren't putting up your hands. Yeah, you missed Hungary by about 30 years. Who's in support of democracy? Yeah. How about human rights? Right? How about this one? Freedom of speech. Who's for freedom of speech? Actually, you're not. I saw this done in a presentation at our university about this very topic, and the bottom line went something like this. There's no absolute freedom of speech. We can't get up here and say hateful things against religions, women, transgender people. You just can't. There are limits that each society draws that says when things are hateful or against the law. And in chiropractic, we have the same. Just because you got a certificate or a diploma on your wall is no right to say whatever you like. There's no absolute right of freedom of speech. And that's where the regulators come in. Regulators can say, you can't say you do surgery on people. You can't say that you deliver babies if you're not trained. So the regulators control that. So, sort of like in society, chiropractic has its hard limits as well. So we're not going to talk about that. What we're going to talk about is the multiple voices in chiropractic who speak for the rest of the topics. And that goes all the way from presidents of societies to colleges to associations to blogs and Instagram. Everyone has a voice in our profession now, don't they? And when the colleagues you want to work with the healthcare systems that you want to work with say, well, I read this thing on Instagram yesterday about what chiropractic is that a good thing that we all have a voice? So who speaks for us is a very relevant question because more than any other time, we all have a voice and we're all using it. So what's the strategy going forward? Who do our collaborators and our politicians and our policymakers listen to? Right? So when it all started, there was really only one voice in our profession. It was the founder. It was the king. It was the person who created it, and when they were still alive, they could say, well, what I really meant was this. And then a month later or 2 months later, I was kind of thinking we should also be doing this. And then that person died, Dee died, and then guess what happened? The monarchy continued, and then the son's voice became the voice of the profession. But, the Palmers just weren't that prolific. They didn't have a royal lineage that we could follow. So pretty soon other people filled in the gaps. And that's where we saw the gurus speaking for the profession, right? Everyone had their take on it now. And it was a challenge to who were you going to listen to? Well, that's when the next phase of the profession came in with the politicians. Because before we had data, how did we make the case for chiropractic? You had to make a good argument, right? Do you remember those days? You'd go to a cocktail party and someone said, I don't believe in chiropractic. And you have to say, well, in my practice, I've seen some people get better. And then it would go back the other way. Well, I knew someone who didn't get better. And we needed people who were really good at arguing. We needed people who could make a case for us because that's the only thing we had. Hey, but now, who leads the profession? We're in an era where we have this now, science. So who leads the profession? I would suppose to you today that now we're in the era where no one leads the profession. Science not a person. We're making a jump to where science leads the profession, and we represent the science. Our job is to not have an opinion that comes out of nowhere. Our job is to be good stewards and representatives of this, of the science. And that's a really big shift for people. We have people in this room whose whole careers were working their way up a system to get to a point where their opinion mattered. And now I'm saying your opinion matters far less because it's the data that drives what you should be saying, not the internal vision that you might have. That's just a version of guruism. Right? So where do we go from here? Are you saying that we don't need leadership in the profession? Well, the data doesn't advocate for itself. You publish it, it sits there. It has no way of having a voice for itself. So what we need is our leadership, our clinicians to speak for this. We need our leadership and our thought leaders to say, what are the priorities? Because we have limited resources. We can't do it all. And with all the data that's flooding us right now, we have to pick and choose the battles. That's where we need our leadership. But it's still based on what's coming out of the science, because it's much easier to develop a position on that rather than a position that doesn't have evidence. So how do we go about doing it? How do we make this transition for us to be representatives of the science as a profession versus representatives of our own views, or what our teachers told us, or what our family members who were chiropractors wanted us to do? How do we make that change? That's a big change for a profession. Something's never happened in our history. Well, the first thing, and this is a whole other talk we can do another day, and I think Jorn's going to speak to this a little bit. You've got to get the data. And it's a hard thing. It's not easy. It doesn't land in your inbox on Monday morning. There's a little bit of work, but it's much easier than it ever was. We have the World Federation of Chiropractic reading list. If you're interested in any topic, if someone says to you, Dave, would you come and give a talk at our hospital on headache? You think, what am I going to do? I want to do that. It's important to do that. I'd like to represent the science. You can go to the World Federation of Chiropractic. We have a list of 23 different topics with the top 10 papers that you can read and get familiar with any topic. Sean Thistle has the RRS, the Research Review Services, that help take the data and put it into little nuggets for you to be able to represent the science. But that's another talk. Once you have a little bit, and it can just be one thing you're good at. You know one little area, maybe one study, the Cassidy study on vertebral artery stuff, whatever it is, you're good at it. Now you have to be brave. You have to be brave because we're no longer in the position where we always have to negotiate. There are actually some right answers now. If a pilot phones the control tower and says, should I land on runway A or runway B, chiropractors, I think, just from history, would negotiate a compromise to land the plane in the middle. Because we have to bring everything. But now we don't always have to do that. There are right answers. And our default position of compromise and diplomacy, I know Richard will talk about that, we don't have to use them as often as we did. We're not a marriage. We don't have to be considerate of someone else for the rest of our lives. There is a right answer sometimes, and we can stand up for it. We're not a news agency where we have to give equal time to another viewpoint to make good TV. We don't have to give equal time to craziness. There are sometimes right answers that we can stand up for. Okay. For the researchers, how do you go about this? You're the people who create the data. You're the ones who are at ground zero of the knowledge that we all represent. But imagine the clinicians in the room who see this. I make a contribution from every treatment I make that goes towards the Norwegian Society, which is great. Or I make an annual contribution, or I write a check that says I'm going to support research. And then when something gets a little rough, someone comes out with a position against chiropractic, Where are you? Where are the voice of our researchers on a regular basis? Okay? We can do that now. Think of the betrayal our clinicians feel when they support us to do the research, and we're not willing to take a few scars to stand up for that. When people went to jail in our profession for what they did. So researchers, I'm calling you out. If you're expert in something, it's time to stand up for that on social media. It's time to stand up for it when you hear about it in the community. Okay? There are right answers, and we can stand up for them when the time comes. And if you're not sure about how to do that, come talk to the people who have, because there are people you can go up against who they will never change their mind, and all you'll do is get an ulcer. And we're going to talk about that. So for clinicians, how do you do that? Clinicians, you're the users of the data. You're the people who we tell every day you need to be evidence-based. You have to do the 3 pillars of evidence-based medicine: the evidence, patient values, clinician experience. You have to put that all together. So how do you do that? It's hard. It's really hard, but you can be brave with it as well. You can take a topic that you're interested in and stand up for it. And if you're not sure about how to do that, ask around. There's some battles you want to fight and there's some you don't. Because with this whole topic of freedom of speech, right, the discussion is always, should you pay attention to this view and give it fuel for the fire, or should you ignore it? And by ignoring it, do we let it expand and grow? That's always a tough one. So clinicians, you're not in an easy spot. But if you pick your battles, you can do really well. And what I tell my students, what we tell our grad students, is 1 and out. That's probably the best reasonable way of doing things. If you want to make a comment on the internet, if you want to address something at a society, make your comment, make your position heard, you're on record, and then go. Sometimes all that happens are people shouting and yelling at each other after that. So you can make your position and then withdraw. It's not a bad strategy. For politicians, you've probably got the most work to do, right? You're the ones who tell us all we need to do evidence-based medicine. This is the way the profession is going. Where's evidence-based leadership? That's something we don't talk about, is it? Is our leadership and our policies and our schools, are they really following what we see in the principles of evidence-based practice and evidence-based care? And you may think so, but let me ask you this. Everybody think of an organization that's close to you. It could be your local society, it could be one that you sit in or one that you represent. And just think to yourself, how many of those organizations have a liaison with a scientist? How many organizations have a scientist on their board of directors? Where's the discussion? Where's the dialogue between the people who know about this stuff, the people who use it, the clinicians? That's why we're here. But where's the evidence-based leadership? I would say by example, just by our actions, we're not as evidence-based in our leadership as we think, just given that where are the scientists and where are the discussions on an ongoing basis? Not when there's a crisis, we'll be there for you then, but on an ongoing basis, where is that? So why? Why do we care about this? It would be easy just to go into practice, do your thing, retire, and never have to worry about any of this, right? Everyone's doing okay, why upset the boat? Well, the reason is that people are watching. People watch this. And it used to be, the bar was, can we produce research, right? And now we've got a research program. We've got a hell of a research program that's doing great things. But it's not can we produce the research anymore. People are watching, how do we use it? Do we stand by it? Do we live by it? Do we let the practitioner who says that we should drink juice instead of get a flu shot or a vaccination, do we let that go as the people who are in this room? And just rely on complaint-driven process that hopefully someone in the public will see that and report it and then we'll deal with it? Or do we have a responsibility for that? People are watching now, and our profession is also being judged not on the research, but on what we do with it. So, freedom of speech, it's something we have to talk about. And for some people, what it means is that we just have to speak louder. Right? We have to shout down the other group. And if anything, that's not what I'm saying. Right? We have to be respectful. Right? There's no need to shout. There's no need to shame other things. The message that I got at the University of Alberta when we had this campus-wide discussion on freedom of speech is that when someone has an opposing view, you don't necessarily lock them out. You provide an alternative and speak about that alternative and make a better product and let people come to that better product. And that's what this is about. By being able to be the stewards of the science, by being able to represent the data, whether you're a researcher, a clinician, or a leader, that's what freedom of speech is about. Making a better product that pull the people to us, that pull the clinicians to us. That's what putting the act in chiropractic is all about. Thank you.